Rule 3 says the finite verb of a relative clause must agree with its subject. The subject can be who, which, or that, or a noun or pronoun in the relative clause. Now, when you read this on its own, it might get a little confusing, but trust me, examples are going to make this rule very clear. All right, so pay close attention. Now, it says, I know a girl who collects scarves. Now, we know that this is our relative clause, right? Now, it says the finite verb in the relative clause must agree with its subject. Now, let's find out the subject of this verb. What is this? What subject is this verb pointing to? Who is this verb pointing to? Let's determine that. I know a girl who collects scarves. Who is collecting scarves here? The girl. So you see that the person collecting the scarves is the girl. So this verb is pointing to this girl as its subject. And since the girl is singular, the verb should be or must be singular. All right. The second example, I know a few girls who collect scarves. You find out that here the collection of scarf or collection of the scarves is being done by a few girls. Few girls here is not singular. Girls plural, of course, and because a few girls plural, so the verb must be plural. You realize that here the plural verb without s, and the singular verb with s. You remember that the small trick I gave you back in class, okay? This is quite basic. Now let's go to another example. It says Billy wants the toys that or which are on the counter. Of course, we know in the remember box on the previous page, it says that goes for all nouns including people, while which goes for all nouns except people. So that all nouns including people, counter is a noun, of course, that covers, and which is can also go here, pardon me, which can also go with this because it's not a person, and which goes for all except people, okay? So this is how come you have a slash. So you either use the sentence with Billy wants the toys that are on the counter, or Billy wants the toys which are on the counter, either correct. All right. Now, when you say that are on the counter, what are on the counter? So we replace this with what to help us determine. We always, of course, you see that is the little trick I've been using to find out what the finite verb in the relative clause points to. I ask myself, I replace the relative pronoun with what or who. Do you understand? So what are on the counter? The toys. See? Now because toys, plural, so we use the plural verb are. Do you understand now? So this are the subject of this finite verb is you just ask yourself, what are on the counter? The toys are on the counter. So this is the subject now. So since toys are plural, are plural. Okay? Now let's see the second example. All the examples 1, 2, and 3 are explaining that the subject can be the who, the which, or the that in the relative pronoun. You see here they used who. Here they used that and which. And this who is pointing to this girl. So even though the arrow has gone all the way to the girl, I told you earlier that the girl is the same as the who. So when the point to the girl is still the same as who, don't get confused. The who here is same as the girl. So the subject can point to the who. The subject can also point to the who, as in here. Who here is still same as the few girls. Okay? Here is pointing out to the that. All right, says who, which, and that. It's pointing to the that and the which. Okay? Of course, we know that and which referring to the toys. Okay? Now, here it gets a little tricky because the last example is explaining when it's point or a noun or pronoun. The subject can be the noun or pronoun in the relative clause. Now, let's see. It says Billy wants the toys that the sales girl is holding. Billy wants the toys which the sales girl is holding. Now let's see. Let's determine which verb, the subject of this finite of this finite verb phrase is holding. Who is holding something? Of course, we know that something here is the toys, right? So who is holding the toys? Who is holding the toys? The sales girl. Billy is not the one holding the toys. Billy wants the toys that this person is holding. So who is holding the toys? The sales girl. So you see that instead of the arrow now going all the way to point to this, the word here as it's been doing, the object of the sentence, of the main clauses, this one is slightly different. It's pointing to a noun in the relative clause. Just like it says here, the subject can be a noun or pronoun in the relative clause. Okay, so this time around it's no longer pointing to the that or the which or the who. Now it's pointing to the noun, and the noun in the relative clause here is the sales girl. All right, and sales girl, singular. A sales girl. Don't be confused by this S here, please, girls. I know these are the kind of things that can confuse you. It's a girl, one sales girl. So the verb is singular, is holding. All right, is, we know, is a singular verb. Of course, is holding, we know that's a present continuous tense. All right, so now a quick look at the remember box, a very quick one. It says simple and compound sentences do not contain subordinate clauses, but complex sentences do. I gave you a short note on the group page, on our WhatsApp group. I think it was last week when we revised Unit 6 of the reading, or I think it was 2 weeks ago. Either way, but it was you would remember if you go through our chat history, or those who can just recall from their memory. I gave you a short note when we dealt with that revision from the Cambridge checkpoint, and I was asking you if relative pronouns can be found in simple or compound sentences. A lot of you got that question wrong, and I'm not even sure a handful of you took the pain to go through the note I dropped. Just the very few of you who did that were able to realize that we only use relative clauses for complex sentences, and now the grammar textbook is repeating it. A simple sentence cannot contain a simple sentence cannot contain a relative clause, because a simple sentence is a sentence containing one finite verb and most times one subject. So I can't have one finite verb and one subject and then leave my simple sentence meaningless. I don't know if you get the point I'm trying to make. Simple sentences are independent sentences containing just one finite verb and one subject, most of the time one subject. Okay, so it cannot have a relative clause. A compound sentence, on the other hand, are two simple sentences joined together by a coordinating conjunction, just like in the previous lesson. Just flip back to 15.1, okay? That is where we came across compound sentences, joining two or more simple sentences using coordinating conjunctions. Now, the third one, a complex sentence, this is where we have a complex sentence, because a complex sentence simply means one dependent sentence and one independent. Okay, so the dependent sentence is the relative clause, all right, and the independent sentence is the simple sentence. So you can think of it this way: I have a simple sentence and I have a relative clause joined together, and then I have a complex sentence. Now let's see here. It says he played a tune, it made her smile. Two simple sentences. You see one finite verb, one finite verb. Okay, now let's see the next one. He played a tune and it made her smile. Now we've joined these two sentences with a coordinating conjunction, forming a compound sentence. And now the third one says he played a tune which made her smile. You see, he played a tune. This is our simple sentence, an independent sentence that can stand alone. Now we have our relative clause, which made her smile. This sentence is the subordinate clause. It cannot stand alone. So combining a simple sentence or combining a simple sentence or an independent clause with a relative clause or a dependent clause, we have complex sentence. Okay, Now, the last point says a main clause can form a complete sentence on its own, but a subordinate clause cannot. I've been saying this since the very beginning of this lesson. He played a tune. This is a main clause. It's a simple sentence. It's an independent sentence. It can stand alone. Now here it says, which made her smile. Which made her smile. This is not, this is a clause. Of course, I told you, all clauses contain finite verbs. This is a finite verb. So this is a clause, all right? But it's not independent. Why? Because it cannot stand alone. It's a relative clause. It's a subordinate clause. It cannot stand alone, all right? So this brings us to the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions, you know exactly where to find me.